I never thought I'd end up on an oil rig, let alone one that had been abandoned for years. When the company approached me, they pitched it as a routine investigation, something easy: check the rig, make sure it's structurally sound, and report back. I didn't have much choice. The pay was good, and I needed the money. Still, the rumors about the place gnawed at me. Stories of people going missing, strange occurrences, whispers of curses, but I brushed them aside. It was just a rusting hulk in the middle of nowhere. What could go wrong? The journey to the rig took longer than expected. The boat's engine sputtered, as if it sensed where we were going and wanted no part of it. By the time we arrived, the sun was already setting, casting the massive structure in long shadows that stretched across the churning sea. It was bigger than I imagined, towering over us like a dark monument of rust and steel. As we approached, I noticed something odd. The water around the rig was unusually calm, eerily still compared to the rest of the ocean. I climbed the steel ladder, my hands gripping the cold metal, the dampness of the sea air making everything slick. Reaching the top, I was greeted by silence. No sound of machinery, no signs of life, just the wind whistling through the empty catwalks and the distant crashing of waves against the rig's supports. The structure groaned occasionally, settling like an old house in the dead of night. But there was something else, something that felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but a chill ran down my spine as I stepped onto the deck. Everything looked stable, I muttered to myself, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. The rusted metal beneath my feet creaked as I moved, the sound echoing through the hollow corridors. The first few hours were uneventful. I took notes, measured structural integrity, and marked potential repair spots. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, things started to change. It began with small things, shadows where there shouldn't have been any, the sensation of being watched. I told myself it was just my imagination, the isolation playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, faint footsteps, the soft clinking of metal chains dragging across the floor, as if someone, or something, was moving just out of sight. I stopped, holding my breath, listening intently. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaking slightly. Silence. Then, just as I was about to dismiss it, the sound came again, closer this time. My heart began to race. "Who's there?" I shouted, gripping my flashlight tightly. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing only rusted pipes and metal grating. But then I saw it, a figure at the far end of the catwalk, standing motionless, staring at me. Its face was obscured by shadow, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. I blinked, and it was gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my exhausted mind. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't alone. I quickened my pace, eager to finish the inspection and get out of there. The wind had picked up, howling through the rig's open spaces, making the metal moan and groan. I heard whispers carried on the wind, too faint to make out, but unmistakably human. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The entire rig plunged into darkness for a heartbeat, then flickered back on. My heart pounded in my chest. That wasn't supposed to happen. The rig had been powered down for years. The generators weren't functional. I pulled out my radio, but all I got was static. "Damn it," I muttered. "Something's wrong." I felt a drop in temperature, like I had stepped into a freezer. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I turned a corner and saw the control room door hanging ajar, swaying slightly in the wind. I hadn't opened it earlier. Slowly, I pushed it open, my flashlight cutting through the inky darkness. Inside, everything looked as it should, dusty, old, and untouched, except for one thing. The control panel, which had been dead for years, was lit up, lights blinking erratically. "What the hell?" I whispered, stepping closer. As I reached for the console, the screens flickered to life. Static at first, then something else, a face, distorted and twisted, screaming in silence. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The face vanished, replaced by a single word that scrolled across the screen: leave. I didn't need to be told twice. I spun on my heels, ready to get off this cursed rig, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The lights flickered again, plunging me into complete darkness. My flashlight sputtered, barely holding on, casting weak beams of light as I stumbled forward. Footsteps echoed around me, closing in from all sides. I could hear heavy breathing, whispers, and something else, like wet footsteps slapping against the metal floor. Panic surged through me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I ran, not caring where I was going, just needing to escape. As I rounded a corner, I saw it again, that figure from earlier, standing at the far end of the hallway. This time, I could see more. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were black pits, devoid of any humanity. It took a step forward, and I could hear the squelching of its feet as if it had just crawled out of the sea. I froze, unable to move, my legs feeling like lead. It was coming closer, its mouth opening in a silent scream, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The air around me grew colder, and I felt a presence, something dark and ancient, pressing down on me. A voice whispered in my ear, though there was no one there. "You shouldn't have come." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I stumbled back, tripping over a loose piece of metal and falling hard onto the grated floor. Pain shot up my leg, but I didn't care. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not daring to look back. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was following me was getting desperate. The rig groaned and shuddered as if it, too, was trying to shake off the intruder, me. I burst out onto the main deck, gasping for air, my chest heaving. The boat was gone. The platform where it had been tethered was empty, the lines snapped as if something had torn them apart. I was trapped. Panic took over. I could hear them now, the whispers, the footsteps, the dragging of chains. They were getting closer. I looked around, searching for any way off the rig, any means of escape. But the rig was vast, a maze of metal and rust, and I had no idea where to go. The sound of metal scraping against metal rang out behind me. I turned slowly, dread creeping up my spine. There, standing at the entrance to the control room, was the figure. Only now, there were more of them, pale, hollow-eyed figures emerging from the shadows, their silent screams filling the air. I backed up to the edge of the platform, the ocean swirling below me, dark and unforgiving. My heart raced. There was no way out. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who or what I was pleading with. And then I heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable, drifting on the wind. "You will never leave." The words echoed in my mind, "You will never leave." My body was frozen in place, muscles locked in terror. The figures stood in a growing circle around me, their empty eyes locked on mine, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for me to make a choice. The platform beneath my feet groaned, and I felt the faint vibrations of the sea lapping against the rig's corroded underbelly. My back was against the railing now, the cold metal pressing into my spine. Below me, the ocean swirled in a dark vortex, its depths calling to me with a strange, hypnotic pull. I could almost feel it, an ancient force lurking in the abyss, waiting for me to fall. I shook my head, trying to snap out of it. No, this couldn't be happening. There had to be a way out. I forced myself to take a step forward, but the figures blocked every path. I was trapped. Please, I whispered again, my voice trembling. What do you want from me? The air grew heavier, and a thick, unnatural fog began to rise from the cracks in the platform, seeping out from between the rusted steel like the breath of the dead. The temperature dropped even further, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. I could see my breath in front of me, forming little clouds in the freezing air. A low, guttural sound filled the space around me, a growl, or maybe a moan. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. My eyes darted between the figures, who were now standing impossibly still, their empty eyes watching me with something that resembled hunger. Their mouths began to open, one by one, but no sound came out. Just the silence of the dead. Suddenly, a figure moved. It stepped forward with slow, deliberate steps, its pale, clammy skin glistening under the dim lights. My heart leaped into my throat as it reached out a hand, its long, bony fingers stretching toward me. I took a step back, and my foot slipped on the slick metal grating. I barely managed to catch myself on the railing, the cold steel digging into my palm. It was then that I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure's hand wasn't reaching for me. No, it was pointing behind me, toward the dark waters below. A voice whispered in my ear again, low and raspy, sending shivers down my spine. Jump. I whipped around, half expecting to see someone there, but there was no one. Just the endless expanse of black water. I looked back at the figure, and it was still pointing, its hollow eyes fixed on me, urging me toward the edge. Jump, the voice repeated, louder this time, more insistent. No, I shouted, my voice cracking. I'm not jumping. But the figures began to move, closing in on me, their footsteps slow and deliberate. They weren't going to let me leave. Not alive, at least. Panic surged through me. I was trapped, surrounded by these ghostly apparitions, with nowhere to go but down. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but there was none. The rig was too high, the water too dangerous. If I jumped, I'd never survive the fall, or whatever waited for me in those dark depths. The fog thickened, swirling around my legs, rising up to my waist. I could barely see the figures now, their forms distorted and shadowy in the mist. But their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, watching, waiting. Then I heard it, a voice, soft and melodic, coming from the water below. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't like the other voices. This one was different, almost alluring. I peered over the edge, squinting through the fog. And there, beneath the surface of the water, I saw something, a faint light, flickering and pulsing, like a beacon. It was beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way, and I found myself drawn to it, despite the terror gnawing at my insides. The voice in the water called to me again, this time clearer. Come to me. It was as if the sea itself was speaking to me, promising something, salvation, perhaps. Or maybe it was something darker, more sinister. I couldn't tell. But in that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to escape. Without thinking, I swung my legs over the railing and perched on the edge, the cold wind biting at my skin. The figures behind me didn't move. They just stood there, watching, as if they knew what I was about to do. "Come to me," the voice whispered again, and I closed my eyes, letting its melody wash over me. I was about to jump when something grabbed my arm, strong, solid, and very much alive. I gasped, my eyes snapping open, and turned to see a man standing beside me, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in years. "You can't go in the water. It's not what you think." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who are you?" He shook his head, glancing nervously at the figures behind us. "There's no time. You have to listen to me. That thing in the water, it's not here to save you. It's what brought us all here. It's what killed them." I looked down at the water, the light still flickering beneath the surface. "What do you mean? What killed who?" "The crew," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They thought they could leave. They thought they could escape. But once you're here, you're trapped. The rig won't let you go. And that thing in the water, it's hungry." I felt my stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" "There's something beneath the rig," he said, his grip tightening on my arm. "Something ancient. It's been here long before the rig was built. The crew disturbed it, and now it won't stop until it's taken everyone." I glanced back at the figures, who were now eerily still, their eyes glowing faintly in the mist. They weren't alive. They were something else. "I've been here for years," the man continued, his voice trembling. "Trapped, just like them. I've seen others come and go, and none of them ever make it out. You can't trust the water. You can't trust anything here. It's all a trap." I looked at him, my mind reeling. "How do we get out?" He swallowed hard, glancing around as if searching for something. "There's only one way. You have to destroy it, the thing beneath the rig. It's the source of all of this. If you can stop it, you might have a chance." I didn't know if I believed him, but what choice did I have? The figures were closing in again, their hollow eyes watching us with unsettling intensity. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man hesitated, his eyes darting to the control room. "There's an emergency system, an old failsafe. It can flood the lower levels of the rig. It's dangerous, but it might be enough to destroy whatever's down there." I nodded, my mind racing. "Where is it?" "In the control room," he said, pointing. "But be careful. Once you activate it, you'll only have a few minutes before the rig goes down." I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran toward the control room, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. The figures didn't follow. They just stood there, watching, as if they knew what was coming. I reached the control room, my hands shaking as I flipped switches and pulled levers. The system groaned to life, lights flashing on the console as alarms blared throughout the rig. Come on," I muttered under my breath, my fingers flying over the controls. Finally, the system activated, and a deep rumble shook the entire structure. The rig groaned and creaked, the sound of rushing water filling the air as the lower levels began to flood. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. A voice, faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. "You will never leave." I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and everything went black.